All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you for joining and welcome to the IAC Acoustics Barrier Walls and Outdoor Noise Control Systems webinar. I'm your host, Ryan Wheeler. I'm the Commercial Industrial Sales Manager. Things we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk briefly about IAC Acoustics and history and some of the personnel. We're going to talk about product features related to barrier walls, noise screen applications, and we'll have some opportunities for questions and answers. At any time throughout this webinar, if you'd like to ask a question, you can type them into the GoToWebinar app, and if I happen to see that, I can stop and address the question. If not, I will look at the end, and at a very minimum, I will email the answers to any questions that we might have. IAC Acoustics was founded in 1949 by a man named Martin Hirschhorn. Mr. Hirschhorn started on Jackson Avenue in the Bronx, and he worked his way up to Commerce Ave, where he built his acoustic laboratory. He sold the business in 1998, and he remained the CEO until 2001. Today, IAC Acoustics belongs to Catalyst Acoustics Group, which is the parent company to several sound control companies. The director of IAC Acoustics is Thomas Hines. He's got 20 years of experience with IAC. He started as an installer and worked his way up through the ranks, was the national sales manager, and today he's the director. He's an extremely valuable resource that we have here at IAC. He knows all the product lines and how to install and all the functionality of all the products. So we're lucky to have him here. Again, I am Ryan Wheeler, Commercial Industrial Sales Manager. I'm relatively new here at IAC. I joined the team August 24th, 2020. I spent 14 years in the military and most recently spent just under 10 years working for a private defense contractor in Afghanistan, where I was site lead and operations manager for an intelligence collection team over there. Ted Marquis, he's our industrial sales manager. He has 20 plus years of industry experience. Darren Riley has 15 years plus. He's our HVAC product sales manager. And Kalina Winter is our power sports and dyno sales manager. IAC Acoustics Noishield outdoor barrier systems shield people from loud equipment and transportation systems by forming a screen that blocks and absorbs sound energy. These noises can be electrical equipment, such as a transformer, rooftop or ground-mounted HVAC equipment, or transportation systems such as highways or railways. The pictures here on the screen, on the left here, you have some equipment. This is a ground-mounted application. You can see the barrier wall surrounding this equipment. The middle picture is a barrier wall. It's a rooftop application in New York City. You can see the panels and the structural elements here. And the third picture on the right is a barrier wall separating a roadway and a residential area. This is a very basic slide, not meant to insult anyone's intelligence. It's just a kind of a graphic depiction of how the barrier wall works. You have the car on the left here, which is the source, and the receiver, which is the house. Basically, in order to block the sound, you have to block the direct path of the sound, and that's where the barrier wall comes into play. The taller walls will be more effective, and the height of those walls is dependent on the proximity of the wall to either the source or the receiver. Simply put, the closer to the source or the receiver, the wall can be, slightly shorter. This slide shows our performance for transmission loss. Varies from SCC 30 up to SCC 33. And our NRC ranges from 1 to 1.05. What makes IAC superior to the competition? There are many things. First thing we'll talk about is the roll-formed panel construction. We do this for a few reasons. Along with general efficiency, the roll forming enhances quality and prevents oil canning. Oil canning is the appearance of some distortion when looking at the reflection of light off of the surface. In these pictures, you can see a nice, smooth, shiny surface, especially here in this top left picture. If there was oil canning, you'd see different things that would give the appearance of warping or distortion. We also have a weather shedding design with a pitched solid top surface, which sheds water and prevents the water from penetrating the panel. And then we have perforated steel, which in the event that water does make its way inside the panel, it's able to drain through the bottom, the perforated steel. And here in the bottom left picture, you see the perf steel. I think the next slide will get a better drawing of the makeup of the panels. We also use G90 steel, which is unique to IAC, and we actually pre-paint the G90 after it is button punched. So basically we have two sides to a panel. Each side is 2.5 inches, and they're button punched together. So we button punch rather than weld, because when you weld, you'll burn the galvanization and you'll introduce the possibility of corrosion or rust. But back to the the pre-painting of the panel after the button punching, we do that before we insert the fill. So if you can imagine a hollow panel that we paint, we do this. This allows us to put paint on all the surfaces prior to inserting the fill. Other manufacturers may have a great panel, but they assemble the panel first, including the fill, and then they paint the outside, which means that the inside of the panel doesn't have that extra layer of protection and could possibly start to rust sooner. Like I said, so this is another drawing of the panels. They're made of the roll form components, button punched. As you can see here, they're button punched along the top and along the bottom, and these are 2.5 inch sides that make up the 5 inch thick panel. We have the Noishield FS panel. The FS stands for freestanding. This is a 5 inch thick panel. That's the one you're seeing over here in this drawing. We have a continue-line panel, which is also 5 inches thick. And this is basically the same construction as the Noishield FS panel. However, it has a special end cap detail, which allows it to wrap the structural element, creating a more sleek aesthetic, and has less of the structural elements exposed. You have the Noishield SFS, which is also 5 inches thick. This comes with a septum and absorption on both sides. And let's go. The Noishield FST, also 5 inches thick with enhanced low frequency transmission loss. And finally, we have the Slimline. This is a little bit different. This is a 2.5 inch thick panel that is surface mounted. These other panels are all dropped inside of the webbing of an I-beam and stacked on top of each other. The Slimline is attached to the face of the structural elements. And as you can see, it's the 2.5 inches thick. So it's essentially 1/2 of a panel. Our panels come in 18 inches and 24 inches nominally. All of these panels are available in steel and aluminum. So here's the Noishield FS panel, again, freestanding, 5 inches thick. You'll notice the top portion of the panel has a slightly pitched solid upper. This helps with the water shedding, excuse me. And you'll notice on the left-hand side here where we have the perforated sheet metal. This is a margin perf actually, so we have a portion of the panel that is solid. Then you have the perf, and then this bottom corner, you can't really see it here, but this is also a solid piece. This is for the roll forming purposes and prevents any damage or compromising the integrity of the perforated steel. So again, the top portion sheds the water, and then the bottom part that's perforated allows for water to drain out in the event that it enters the panel. Here you can see an example of a standard FS panel and a rooftop barrier system. The bottom right picture shows the structural beams and how we simply slide the panels down into the web of the structural steel. So over here you have the rooftop barrier system, you have the structural steel elements that are exposed. The panels get dropped down inside the webbing, stack on top of each other here. This is what it looks like from above. It's not a bad look. We match the color of the panels to the structural steel. It's on a rooftop. Occasionally, the customers may want something that's more aesthetically pleasing. In those cases, we go to the Continuline panel. As I mentioned before, the Continuline panel is the same panel as the FS panel, but we swap out the end cap and we allow it to wrap the structural steel so that there are no exposed structural elements. As you can see here, instead of being dropped inside the webbing of the I-beam, like the FS panel is, this one has an end cap that wraps the outside of the structural element. So there's very little reveal here. This is the first project that we used the Continuline panels on. This is a BMW Plant. Customer had a beautiful building and had some noisy rooftop equipment. They looked at our product, they looked at the FS panel, and they said they wanted something with less exposed structural steel so that it would better match the appearance of the rest of the building. So we designed an end cap that, again, wrapped the outer flange of the I-beam and had it came up with an appearance that was more similar to the outside of their building. This is another view of a Continuline configuration. It's a rooftop area where we've concealed all of the structural elements. You'll also see here we can integrate doors and electrical equipment to our panels or into our walls in general. This picture shows how the slotted end cap wraps the structural element, which allows the solid front face of the panel to conceal the column. So here's the end cap. It's wrapping the flange on the I-beam. There's very little exposed structural steel. This picture displays the view of the perforated side of the panel. This is a continue line also. It's the back of the barrier wall, which would be towards the noise source. You can see the slotted end caps here that are wrapping the beam. It ensures a nice snug fit that, to ensure that we don't lose any transmission loss. This is just for a grounding strap. This has nothing to do with the actual panel or securing the panel to the beam. Oftentimes, projects require different penetrations. This can be achieved by using panels or steel flashing. IAC can pre-cut these in the factory during production before the powder to ensure no lack of aesthetic performance, or it can also be cut in the field. So a lot of times things change during installation. You have ad hoc requirements that force you to do field cuts to insert electrical components or HVAC equipment. What we have here is a Slimline panel. So we spoke about the FS and the continue line, which are both 5 inches thick. This Slimline panel is 2.5 inches thick. It has a solid outer surface, which is on the bottom here, and then a perforated inner surface. These are surface mounted or face mounted, and they're supported by vertical elements with fasteners to the top and the bottom tabs. What I mean by that is the top or bottom tab here, the top tab here. These have an STC rating of 30, our Slimline panels, and an NRC of 1.0. Here you can see the Slimline panel, how it attaches to the face of the structural elements. You have the top and the bottom tab here. They overlap and then they get bolted to the structural elements. This is an example of a Slimline configuration in the field. After installation, you have the solid outer, and over here you can see the perforated inner. This is some trim detail that we use on the Slimline. Here on the right, we have a Z channel that we use at the end of the panel stacks. Kind of enhances the aesthetic, kind of brings everything together on the end. Nice uniform appearance. And then in between panel stacks, we use a hat channel. Again, the sides of the ends of these panels are open, so this trim detail is kind of neatens the appearance of the panel and the stack and the barrier wall system as a whole. Here's the back of a Slimline panel. Again, these are mounted to the front of this tube steel. And the perforated side is towards the source. This is an interesting project, and this kind of shows an example of unique circumstances in the field. So here we have 3 panel spans. On the panel spans on the right, these 2 on the right, you can easily use FS or continue line panels here. because there's plenty of room to drop them in from above. As I mentioned before, they are dropped into the webbing of the I-beam and they stack on top of each other. But when you look over here on this particular span, there is an overhang. So that would prevent you from dropping these panels in from above. So in a situation like this, the Slimline panels are going to allow you to finish this portion and this span by mounting these to the front and mounting them to the structural elements. So this particular wall, each span is a Slimline panel, but if there were different requirements for STC, you could potentially use FS panels on some portions and then Slimline panels on others where you weren't able to drop them in from above. IAC scope on barrier wall projects has a wide range. We can supply just the panels and components, or we can add the structural support. We can supply the anchor bolts and cages, PE stamps and designs, and we can also provide delivery and installation. The primary applications, whether they are ground mounted or rooftop mounted, are HVAC equipment, machinery, transformers, pumps and valves, and generators. This slide shows two examples, one ground mounted and one rooftop mounted. Ground mounted here. Clearly this is rooftop mounted. For rooftop applications, HVAC equipment is quite common. Oftentimes, you're able to have open access as opposed to having doors, as seen in the top right picture here. This was a project where there was equipment that required a certain level of airflow. So in the design process, we worked out a corner to be left open that would enable the air to flow through at the required rate. On the bottom left here, you can see the APR door that we included, and then just a standard barrier wall system here on the bottom right, rooftop barrier. This is an example of a project done for a transformer substation. This customer, they didn't want any structural elements going to the ground. So from the barrier wall system here, you don't see any structural elements that are going down to the ground. They had existing walls, so we actually cantilevered the entire system off of the face of the existing wall. So this is an example of our capability to assist with engineering from start to finish when you have unique or complex conditions at the job site. These are a few more examples of ground-mounted applications. As I mentioned before, highways, railways, rail yards, airports, etc. This is an example of a light rail transportation system in Pasadena, California. You can see here in the top picture, the solid side, which would be towards the receiver. You have possibly a residential area and a walkway or a driveway here on the left. And then on the bottom picture, you see the perforated side that is towards the noise source, which in this case would be the railway system. This application, we actually used a special powder coat that has an anti-graffiti additive, which allows for easy removal of graffiti if in the event that somebody decided they wanted to put their name on these walls. All right. Thank you for joining today. That concludes the barrier wall and outdoor noise control system webinar. If anybody has any questions, which I don't see, you can type them in. Also, you can email me. This is my contact information here. I can send you a copy of the presentation. I can also answer any questions that you might have. My name is Ryan Wheeler. My email address is rwheeler@iacacoustics.com. And my phone number is 413-537-1616. Please feel free to contact me directly. You can go to iacacoustics.com to view other products. If there are no questions, thank you again for joining, and have a great rest of your week.